Lance mentioned, my name is Danny Crowell. I'm a professor in the higher education program here. It's my pleasure to be here today to discuss with church students and their experiences funding their post-secondary journeys. As Lance mentioned, my work focuses specifically on post-secondary pathways, specifically looking at the experiences of racially minoritized, economically disadvantaged students and immigrant students. And so it tends to be adjacent to just focusing with church students. So I really appreciated the opportunity to dig a little bit more into this topic. And just learn a lot more, but also share that knowledge with you. So again, I want to thank Professor McCready and his leadership team for inviting me to discuss this timely and important issue at this conference. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. So thanks for the leadership team for all your work. I also want to give a shout out to Erin Anderson, who's a doctoral student in the higher education program, for her excellent research assistance and putting this presentation together. So to give you some of what we're talking about today, I want to start on the building of many of the conversations that have been going on in the building throughout the day. I discussed the experiences of the church students in Ontario based on the literature, and I focus specifically on how inconsistency and how the church students are defined by federal and institutional policy has immense implications for how they fund their studies. After that, we discuss some trends and takeaways from the National Represented Survey, exploring the church students' funding decisions, and then finally, I want to conclude with areas for future inquiry and recommendations for how to better support this population. Before we dive into this talk, I want to bring you all on a little virtual picture to Moraine Valley Community College. Moraine Valley is a two-year institution located in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, and I really appreciate Lance. A big part of his keynote this morning was talking about his relationship with his mother and how that has influenced his work in this area. And so my mom was a teacher assistant, a teacher aide in the Chicago public school system for over 20 years, until she recently retired just a year ago. And I bring her up because policy changes in the mid-2000s required her to earn some college credits. Up to that point, my mom had not any post-secondary training at all, and she had just completed high school in Mexico. And this was actually her first time even stepping foot on a college campus. But of course, if she didn't comply with the additional education requirements, she would be in jeopardy of losing her job. So as a result, I found myself as a 10-year-old waiting in the parking lot alongside my brother alternate nights as she attended those classes after work. And at the time, I just thought it was something that we had to do. But as I had the opportunity to come and speak with you all today, I had a chance to reflect on it a little bit more, right? And I recognized the additional stress that it caused from a financial, from a psychological, from a time management standpoint. And so I offer this anecdote to say that experiences like these have become much more common across higher education as adults seek opportunities to enhance their skills, retrain for new careers, or meet the ever evolving demands of their workplaces. And so my mom's story is not unique. Many mature students are having to balance jobs, families, and other responsibilities. For them, this takes over their lives. And the barriers, both from a financial and logistical standpoint, are significant. And so in this talk, we'll shed light on several of these barriers, several of the barriers that they encounter, along with exploring how higher education systems can better support individuals who seek further education later. And so to start, I think it's important to begin by reviewing what's been written about this population as it relates to the financing funding. And so what's become evident is that the pathways from mature students into higher education vary significantly. Some non-traditional students pursue attending college or university due to unexpected job losses or requirement changes that was described earlier. Others might have recently migrated to Canada and seek commensurate work opportunities from their home countries, aiming to find jobs that align with previous roles and qualifications. And so upscaling is also very common among internationally educated or trained professionals. Or others just might simply desire to seek new work opportunities as they require additional post-secondary credentialing. However, as we know, such opportunities are associated with several barriers, which some scholars tend to call situational barriers, and those relate to juggling multiple roles and responsibilities. In addition, there are often academic and attitudinal barriers that scholars know, which relate to students not being adequate or prepared for post-secondary studies, especially after having an extended absence from the classroom or not even attending post-secondary in the first place. But what is abundantly clear from my research is that financial barriers are almost always near the top of the list in terms of factors affecting mature student experiences and outcomes. The Canadian literature documents several examples when it comes to accessing and receiving financial aid through provinces such as the Ontario Student Aid Program, also known as SSA. So, for example, students reported comments significant administrative burden when it comes to accessing and applying for financial aid. And they often experience this through the various government forms that they have to fill out that almost always include very technical legal language questions that the forms ask to assess financial aid eligibility. And related to financial aid, the formula used to create financial aid awards is never transparent, right? If you try to Google it, you can't find it. And those aid formulas often rely on very narrow definitions of who an independent student is, which can shape the type of financial aid that a student is eligible to receive. And so one common issue is how the provincial and federal government differs in who they consider to be an independent student. So to illustrate, this slide may be a little bit difficult to read, but I'll try to explain here. So to illustrate, consider students who attended high school between 4 and 6 years ago. This slide shows an aid calculator that's provided by OSAC to provide students with a general sense of tuition fees and other expenses that they might incur, and what financing options are available. Students who work and attend post-secondary full-time since high school will not be considered for the Ontario portion of the Canada-Ontario Integrated Student Loan Program or for any non-repayable grant funding, which could reduce the amount of scholarships and loans that students might be eligible. In order to become eligible for this additional aid, they would have to include the parents' financial information, which, depending on the unique circumstances and situations, right, it may not be possible or even available. And so, a key takeaway here is that inconsistent definitions of who an independent student is, what dependent student is, can have really negative effects on what kind of financial aid options are available to students, even after having to navigate and complete that really complicated financial aid form. However, this notion of inconsistent definitions is not just solely applied to the federal provincial financial aid policy, but it can also extend to how universities identify and enroll mature students as well. There are significant differences in how institutions define who mature students are in the first place, which has implications for admissions to the institution and whether or not they're eligible for any institutional aid, such as grants or bursaries. We know from research that scholars differ slightly in how they may delineate this population, but they tend to kind of coalesce around defining mature students as those seeking additional formal education and training, and they often tend to be at least 21 years old. That's a diversity of 21 at the point of enrollment, and they usually haven't had an extended absence from schooling, which is typically defined as 2 or more years. But institutional policy differs dramatically in practice and how they apply. And so most institutions require students to apply to an alternative route that they not meet standard admissions criteria, which is often predicated on these traditional post-secondary student demographics. And there's almost always a citizenship or permanent residency requirement, which, to those of you who attended that the session earlier about precarious mature students this morning, right? This could be denial from even applying or enrolling in these types of institutions. In addition, these institutions can have unique criteria related to program restrictions, academic requirements, and even constrain full or part-time study. So, for example, broad only considers mature students to be eligible for 3-year baccalaureate art programs and only allow them to enroll initially on a part-time basis until they demonstrate or achieve a certain academic standard, for which then they have the option to attend full time. UOT assesses students with standard admission criteria, but of course, we have really successful programs like UIP that offer additional richer supports. And the University of Waterloo has mature student requirements that actually vary by faculty. And so as we can see, right, students considering one in many nearby schools are often faced with having to navigate very different post-secondary pathways that could have direct impact on eligibility for government aid, in addition to any additional institutional aid that they may have access to once they enroll in the institution. So in summary, there's quite a lot of policy that these students have to navigate and sort through. Other than issues related to post-secondary institutional definitions, research also highlights concerns regarding student services personnel not being aware of financing options for students. My own research and other research focused on post-secondary student success really highlights the importance of institutional agents being aware of students' unique circumstances, so that when staff are well informed and proactive in supporting mature students, they can help bridge that gap between federal and institutional policies and actually meeting, these students' needs. So this can make all the difference between a student securing aid, right, or being forced into less financially or less secure financial options, such as private loans or relying on family support, which of course can offer fewer protections. And so while these last 2 points may seem comparatively, quote unquote, smaller issues compared to the previous ones, right? Maintaining up-to-date knowledge of institutional sources of support can go a really long way in supporting mature students and lessening the financial burdens for these students. And so, based on my analysis of the literature and the larger structural issues, I think it becomes clear that financing higher education for mature students is a gauntlet. However, we know that despite these barriers, mature students continue to enroll in colleges and universities at increasing rates. But what is less known is how mature students end up financing their post-secondary pursuits and how this varies by social background. And so this next part, we're going to discuss local economic landscape, provide some context, and then focus specifically on how students navigate. And so the first, perhaps the most obvious place to start is examining what average university tuition look like over time. And so this graph shows average domestic tuition between 2006 2007 academic year to the current one among undergraduate degree programs in Canada. And so as you can see, in 2007, the average tuition was around $4,500 a year, and since then, tuition has increased steadily over time, except for a dip during the pandemic, up to a recent high of around $7,300. However, we also know that average tuition varies quite a bit by the study, and this graph shows that spread over that same time series. And so on the one hand, we have fields like humanities, social sciences, and education. They tend to stay below that average, with the most recent figures suggesting these programs cost between $5,000 and $6,000 a year. While on the other hand, we see students enrolled in engineering, business, and math programs pay between $7,000 and even upwards of $9,000. And note that I don't include all eligible undergraduate programs here like law, which may actually skew the average a little bit higher. So another takeaway that I want to highlight is that tuition not only increased steadily over time, but it also varies quite considerably by field of study, making cost of living a significant factor for students, but specifically for mature students, right? As these costs can be even more impactful as they consider different career options along with other financial commitments, which I'll talk about a few right here. Next, cost of living remains a significant concern for mature students, as both housing and childcare expenses represent major financial burdens. And so on this slide, we see housing costs have continued to rise, with average rent for an apartment becoming increasingly prohibitive and comprising a larger share of mature students' budgets, right? And these numbers I took from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and these seem actually like underestimates of how much housing costs, right? So you can only imagine, an even greater burden on this population. This next slide demonstrates that while childcare costs have seen a decrease in the past year, they remain pretty high. Adding another year of pressure from church students may juggling, education with caring for young children. And so together, these two factors, housing and childcare, are also really critical when thinking about the larger sort of financial challenges that mature students are facing when trying to fund higher education. All right, let's get into some more data here. So next, I draw on data from the 2020 National Graduate Survey to examine how mature students pay for higher education. And so the National Graduate Survey is a nationally representative survey focused on education and labor market experiences of people who graduated from a Canadian public post-secondary institution in 2020. And they included asking questions related to funding for post-secondary education, which is what I rely on this part of the talk. So the MGS is one of the most used and most often used and publicly accessible data sources on Canadian higher education students. And so this allowed me to focus on students aged 25 or above at the time of graduation to explore the financing decisions. So among those who graduated in 2020, the data highlight that a significant portion of college graduates are mature students, age 25 and above. Particularly those aged between 30 and 39 actually represent the largest share of mature students. In contrast, among university graduates, university graduates tend to be predominantly younger, right? Although there's still an appreciable share of mature students graduating from the university. Next, I want to explore student responses to a question asking them what their main two sources of funding was what their main two sources of funding were during the program. So among students who graduated, I found that about 2/3 of those students relied heavily on current earnings and savings to pay for their education. So this correlates some of the research that I mentioned earlier about the importance of working alongside studying. The next most important source of funding is students rely on for federally sponsored student loans. And actually, the sub-analysis that I'm doing here actually found that mature students are around 7 percentage points more likely to have to rely on federally sponsored student loans than traditionally aged students, right? So mature students are not just relying on earning and saving, but they're actually going and relying on those federally sponsored student loans as well. After that, the next biggest source of support was family support, followed by bank loans. And so students might actually have to go to banks as one of the highest or most important sources of support because they've either maxed out their federal student aid options or they may have been denied federal student aid assistance altogether. This notion of debt can be a particularly tricky one, right? But I also want to say student loans are not a bad thing, right? They can boost access to higher education, particularly those who are in these economically vulnerable situations, right? But we know that there are serious problems that can arise when we face difficulties in paying back those loans. And of course, bank loans, in particular, offer fewer protections than federal student loans, making their repayment. After that, just kind of long down, right? After that, they will have the most important source of support is RESPs, government grants, significant share rely on their employer to help fund their higher education, followed by fewer shares of students relying on credit cards, scholarships, non-government grants. And so again, these findings really correlate to some previous research that I touched on already in terms of many students having to juggle work and studying at the same time, and also have potentially tapping into their savings. There's also sort of a clear reliance on student loans as well, both in addition to families. Okay, so the final point that I want to touch here is to dive a little bit deeper into this notion of government-sponsored student debt, given that it's the second most important source of funding among mature students. And specifically, I wanted to dig a little bit more to understand what attributes predict the likelihood of borrowing a government-sponsored loan. And so this graph represents the difference in the percentage chance of a student taking a loan or not. So the coefficient to the left-hand side of the red line represents a lower chance of borrowing, while plots to the right-hand side of the red line represent a higher chance of borrowing. So for example, a mature student with a disability is about 13 percentage points more likely to take on debt than their counterparts without disabilities. Whereas students who identify as a visible minority, that's kind of the way they measure document race within this national graduate survey. So students who identify as a minority they're about 11 percentage points less likely to take on debt compared to their white non-Asian. And finally, although women are slightly more likely to borrow, we don't have too much confidence in saying that. So the relationship is basically zero. And so these results show that the chances of taking on debt varies quite dramatically, depending on social background. And perhaps the most striking finding here is that students who identify as the visible minority are actually less likely to take on debt, which tends to be the opposite case when focusing on traditionally aged students. And so while data constraints actually don't allow me to explore mechanisms as to why this is the case, there are several points of expertise to help kind of unpack these results. So, for instance, racialized students could have stronger aversions in debt, which could lead to preferences for financing through earning and saving, which we saw is a really popular strategy for many students. Another theory or another explanation might suggest that racialized groups have lower social trust in financial institutions due to historical discrimination and or negative experiences within their communities. And finally, racialized students might just be, there's always the explanation, particularly among economists, right? Like racialized students may be less informed about the availability or benefits of government-sponsored loans, particularly the person who founded to technology university or come from an immigrant background, for example. But again, these are just theories that I'm able to sort of explore the data more. So to summarize the takeaways, stop talking just a few moments, I promise. So I can't really understate the importance of points 1 and 2 as it relates to consistent definitions for mature students, particularly when it comes to federal provincial and institutional policy. Next, we know how important student services personnel, staff, and other administrators can be in providing students with up-to-date information, and that can be a real game changer to ensuring student success. Next, while we know tuition, housing, and childcare costs continue to remain a challenge for students, we also know that they rely on a variety of different sources to help fund their studies, some of which can vary quite dramatically by and so when it comes to recommendations and future research, I would not be a good researcher if I didn't end this talk by saying we need more research. So I strongly recommend that we do more research more broadly on mature students, but more specifically on mature students and their funding decisions. So within that, we also specifically looking at quantitative analysis, looking at finances and the pathways into higher education. Well, the data availability has always kind of been a challenge or constraint in the Canadian context, particularly since the last dedicated mature student-focused survey was administered in 2008. There have been, at least in recent years, new administrative data sets by staff and they can offer promising opportunities to conduct systematic and robust quantitative analysis, looking at their experiences and outcomes. And related to this point, I also think it's critical to consider how financing and funding decisions vary across disciplines and degree programs, particularly given, for example, the rise of the prominence of college baccalaureate degrees, for example, right? And see to what extent mature students are engaging in those types of options. And finally, although I really appreciate studies that examine the association between approaches to funding and student achievement and persistence and graduation, right? I would also strongly consider researchers to use that data and move beyond the traditional outcomes to consider, looking at career trajectories, right, or looking at mental health and well-being with some of these administrative data that can allow linkages to. So that's all we got. Thank you so much for your time and for engaging. I look forward to your questions.
Okay. Questions? Thoughts? Oh. No, you don't have to say.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I was just wondering, were you able to unpack like even positions at the university for mature students like TAs and RAs? Like, did you find that there was a balance, even like in trying to fund one's own education at the university?
So the short answer is no. So I think there are some kind of serious constraints when it comes to this data. So the question that they ask me is like, choose the top two sources of support, and these are the only options, and then that's pretty much it. So we can't really get into, there's around 10% students who rely on TAs in our positions, but we don't know, how they got to positions, to what extent they got to, look for those opportunities on their own. So it's the data's not quite limited in that sense.
Hello, I'm Dr. Carell, one under pleasure, and thank you so very much for the presentation. I'm gonna sit today. Here's my question. I would like to ask first and foremost, could you share insights from your research on the nature of voluntary and involuntary withdrawal from academic studies due to circumstances of financial precariousness? The reason why I ask the question is because in many respects, that is not necessarily part of the discussion. We have students, more specifically mature students, who do not have the financial wherewithal to consistently fund their education. So I do want to ask if your research had revealed what I'm asking. Thank you so very much.
So looking at whether or to what extent financing decisions affect the involuntary or voluntary withdrawal. Yeah, so again, short answer, it's not my fault here, but the data is really tough to answer those types of questions. I think, particularly with this national graduate survey, I do think, however, that you can get at those types of questions using administrative data from StatsCan, which allows you to link, for example, student records to campus enrollment program solicitation, and then seeing whether or not, are they enrolled the following year, yes or no. I would also wager to say this just based on research and also theory related to student persistence and success that it's really hard to price these things up too, right? Like, yes, funding can be a major barrier for many students, right? But we also know that funding is correlated or related to other things that predict involuntary or voluntary withdrawal, right? So even trying to tease apart those relationships can be quite difficult.
You must have from the statement sometime that you also student has a micro address for you. Yet, many micro students continue to be landed between funded and unfunded cohorts. Have you taken a time to look at the impact of funding in particular with respect to funding?
No, that's a good question. I think that's an excellent topic for the many graduate students in the room here. And I think this speaks to Lance's earlier point, right, in terms of the paucity of research on this topic and just answering those basic types of questions. I think the data at this point, they're not going to be perhaps the most robust types of analysis in terms of having all the variables to account for why someone would persist in opposites to graduate or not. But it would still give you enough data to get at those, you know, basically back to the script is trying to look at whether or not finance would be a barrier for student success.
I'm trying to, there's a consistent, situation that comes up that we encountered in the transition year program. And since I'm standing as a change, I don't explain it. Okay, so I'm wondering what's the research that we would need to make headway on it or make a case for it. So the case is, the situation is, students want to, or future students don't want to, come back to higher education, but, finish their higher education, maybe start a four-year degree, but they owe on loans from years past. At least in the transition year program, have a couple of these cases every year. The students want to either come back and finish transition year program, or they want to enter the transition year program. Since we're dependent on funding from OSAT, they haven't sort of repaid their loans consistently, or they haven't repaid them at all because they haven't had employment that has allowed them to live or pay for their housing and pay their student loan. And so they're barred from ever entering back into sort of higher education. What kind of research or what do you think, what do we need to do to sort of make a case for having some different, you know, maybe it's different loan repayment options, or maybe it's actually grants to sort of help pay down sort of loans that haven't paid. I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so really tough situation. I think what comes to mind here is like, of course, the different repayment options. So there's like kind of income driven repayment options like plan, you know, like 5% rate, whatever, so how much you have to pay. You know, that could certainly be an option. I'm just losing my train of thought here. But I would say a major barrier, which I talked about earlier in the presentation, was just how much administrative burden there is in trying to figure out all the options. You know, I'll speak anecdotally. Having gone and attended a small liberal college in the United States, I have a lot of student loans, right? And so just trying to figure out what the repayment options are, as someone with like, you know, who has a PhD, right, and have the time to look into it, it's impossible to figure out because you're on the phone with somebody, you know, trying to figure out, okay, now with this program, over this other option, you have a benefit for me, right? So I really want that this end. So I think reducing the burden on students and trying to figure out what the repayment options are. But also, like, these are things that the financial aid office and any institution should be able to connect to, right? It doesn't mean not be the ones that directly give you the solutions, right? But they're the ones that will, play that for the immediate forward, like, okay, this is kind of the passive education history, this is the loan balance, you know, trash fees will be the best option, right? So kind of putting, instead of being on hold for hours and hours with that, provincial or federal student loan servicer, instead of working with those institutional agents as a way to sort of bridge that gap. One way to do it.
Yeah, just that, I think, many of the students that we support at CYP have difficulty to place where they can reconcile previous loans, maybe because of their experience working with other institutions that have been predatory, and so we utilize them to increase enrollment numbers, and now we can place return to school, actively looking for resources and funds, and try to do so. OSAP does have some limited offerings for rehabilitation. Put your loan back into its standing, but that implicates number of months, paying students interest, and that timeline is what the students who actively engage to between studying now. So much of my presentation after this shameless plug is to do with troubleshooting with UIP students the process of getting LSAT eligible. So yeah, many limitations with which is
Thank you. There. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful presentation here. I was just wondering if there's any such as international trade professionals. You know, a lot of professionals come here expecting to be at a certain level. Some industries are not development, engineering, etc. But they get here and often realize that they have to retreat. The problem is they come with a whole lot of concepts they find here and they simply don't qualify for any type of training assistance. And that's a terrible dilemma whether or not to go to school and put your families who are, especially if they have school age or younger children, and go to school. We know that this maybe that again is not always guaranteed. But has there, any work done in terms of our strategies for this group of professionals who come here, who already have had great jobs and schools, whatever way they came from, and come here and find that they just need something to retrieve, but it's going to take 3 years, and they end up into a dilemma. A lot of them often end up working below the station, and it's not until something drastic happens that they no longer have the asset to help you qualify for funding. So, to prevent that, if that takes place on immigration.
Yeah, good question. I think to answer your question, not enough. I think there was quite a bit of research work we can do with 2000s on international trained professionals. I will also put a plug for my doctoral student, Daniel Rajan, who's not here. He's writing a dissertation on this population because of the very dilemmas and barriers that they encounter, and especially given that the immigration system, the Canadian immigration system, tends to focus on the economic immigrants, right, as a way to bring these highly trained professionals into the country, right? And they quickly realize that they need to get their foreign credentials assessed, right? And that's a process to figure out whether or not you can sort of get the same kind of credential here, or not transfer, right? Otherwise, they're faced with this dilemma that, like, go back to school or not, is it going to take 2, 3, 4 years to get to the same place where I was, in my, country mortgage plan? But I think this also brings up something that Lance talked about earlier in terms of, it's tough to say how much research there is out there on it. Yes, there's not enough for the US or other countries, for example, but we also don't account for the research on the international trained professionals, right? Like, those are mature students as well, right? So I think it's also tough to try to navigate structure, knowing that there could be different sort of definitions or ways to be thinking about their experiences, right? Just depending on the particular most salient identity that they have, or even from this these populations.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a question. So I heard about definition for mature students. I really like that a lot. So I work under last year and also 1 year with research on mature students, and also one piece was the definition of mature student. So for us, we have one national college definition, 19 or 21 in CE, and then we also have student life, 25 or older. So a lot of times when I was in nutrition last year, it was about, I don't feel I can find those categories. So for me, what I can do is I can put because of institution, different research articles, and it could be my definition of mature student is. So for me, I include what mature students tend to be sometimes. So like, for example, are you a first generation, or you have lived experience, a caregiver, are you independent? So different things that are inclusive of what mature student is, because I'm supposed to learn from some research. I know what your recommendation was going forward was for us to do pretty together consistent definition that inform policies for mature students. So what are some of the ways that we can drive that recommendation to make sure it's very clear? Because I feel like now what we should then create the problem is always I'm on a pilot, the mature student, I don't think it's right. So there's different things. So I think really pushing also as a way for us to kind of improve the experiences through funding as well.
for in terms of definition to improve those policies?
So I think probably I mean, it's all very hard to change. I think as people who work in around higher education, might realize how slow things can continue to change, right? Perhaps the easiest part or place to start could be at the provincial or federal level, right? Given that OSAP, right? That's like the people, students have to apply for financial aid. And so that's probably getting some consistency there, probably the right place to start. I think the notion of getting institutional consistency or official consistency across institutions, that's probably the biggest challenge because I think a lot of institutions want to have that autonomy. But I think recognizing that, having a shared type of definition, whether or not that translates directly into policy, but at least kind of understanding that these are the general parameters of what we need when we are engaging with participants, I think could be incredibly useful, right? Because, not even, if you're considering multiple institutions nearby, right? College can get, we're considering interesting as X, right? So university Y. And then once you get enrolled, there may be scholarship or other institutional aid options that are very dramatic, right? And so I think getting some type of consensus on very difficult in practice, right? Like some sort of shared agreement that, like I said, may not be directly translated to policy, but provide some direction for. But it's, like I said, it's not that to navigate this.
We have time to read one more for any questions there.
Mr. President, with the growth of the disability students, actually, more than actually get, why is the BSWD connected to BSWD? Bursaries for disabilities, bursaries for students with disabilities.
I mean, that's just one of the policy options they offer for that population. That's a real something on that. Yeah.
They are connected because the contract for the state that we have the state shows us. So we now know that we don't go to that location. That is it. And I get one question for Professor. Have you looked into also have, I don't know, due to the loan forgiveness program for graduation? So when you graduate, we consolidated the numbers, we are given a 20% university dollars. I don't know that it's even private space, you are graduate recent that they do that, and what you really system of that program is like you are graduate student.
I have not researched that more for this program, but I think, my knowledge of those types of programs come from the US, and they will, you go to school, you get your loans, and they'll be forgiven after, 10 years or so in public sector, public service, which I think could never be an option here in Canada, so. No option for graduate students for certification options.
All right, let's get it. Thank you so much.